2 months later, Gandalf leaves the Shire to look into some troubling news he has heard. Frodo prepares to leave, though not quickly. On the wizard's advice, Frodo plans to head toward Rivendell, the home of the wise Elrond half-elven. To that end, he sells Bag-End to Lobelia Sackville Baggins, a disagreeable relative of Bilbo who has always wanted to get her hands on the house. With the help of Sam and his other friends Peregrine Took, called Pippin, and Meriadoc Brandybuck, called Merry, Frodo packs up and moves out that autumn. Just before he leaves, he throws a small party, as he does every year, for his and Bilbo's shared birthday on September 22nd. Merry, along with another friend, Fredegar, Fatty, Bolger, go on ahead to Frodo's new house, across the Brandywine River in Buckland, with a cart full of luggage. Frodo, Sam, and Pippin plan to follow on foot, taking a few days and camping in the woods at night. Just as they are on their way, Frodo hears a strange voice talking to Sam's father, Ham Gamgee, known as the Gaffer, who lives next door. The voice asks for Mr. Baggins, but the Gaffer responds that Mr. Baggins has already left. Frodo feels that people are getting too inquisitive, and he leaves as quietly as possible. The second day out, the hobbits hear the sound of hooves on the road behind them. Frodo feels a strange desire to hide, so he leads Sam and Pippin off into the trees. The rider is a tall figure on a large, black horse. He is shrouded in a black cloak and his face cannot be seen. He stops near the spot where the hobbits are hiding and seems to sniff the air for a scent. Frodo feels a sudden desire to put the ring on his finger. Then, the rider suddenly rides off again. Sam informs Frodo that it appeared to be the same black rider who was questioning the Gaffer the other night. The hobbits proceed more cautiously, constantly listening for the sound of hooves. As night falls, they hear a horse approaching. Hiding in the trees, they see that it is again a black rider. The black rider stops and starts to approach Frodo, when suddenly it hears the singing voices of elves, mounts its horse, and rides off. The elves approach, and their song ends. One of them, Gildor, greets Frodo. When Pippin asks about the black riders, the elves suddenly look worried, and they take the hobbits under their protection for the night. Later that night, the party stops in what seems to be an enchanted glade, and they have a feast. Frodo, who is known by elves and who knows some of their language, questions Gildor about the black riders. All the elf will say is that the riders are servants of the enemy and therefore must be avoided at all costs. The party settles down to sleep for the night. When the hobbits awake the next morning, the elves are gone, but they have sent word of the hobbits' journey to friendly ears along the way to Rivendell. Frodo decides to take a shortcut across the fields between Woody End and the Brandywine River ferry, because he is now in haste and does not wish to stay on the road where they can easily be seen. Indeed, not long after leaving the road, the party sees a black rider traveling on it. The underbrush is dense, however, and the hobbits make slow progress. Later, they hear two terrible cries, which they assume to be the black riders communicating to each other. Scrambling through bog and briar, the hobbits eventually come upon the fields of Farmer Maggot, of whom Frodo has been afraid ever since Maggot caught the young Frodo stealing his mushrooms. Farmer Maggot welcomes the hobbits and gives them dinner. He then tells them of a strange, dark man who came by earlier asking for a Mr. Baggins. The hobbits, now quite scared, are grateful when Maggot offers to carry them to the Brandywine River ferry in a covered wagon. On the way, they hear hooves approaching, but it turns out to be only Merry, ready to take them across the river and over to Buckland. Chapter 5, A Conspiracy Unmasked. Merry leads the other three hobbits to Crickhollow, where Frodo has bought a small house under the pretense of moving there permanently in order to disguise his departure from the Shire. Crickhollow is in Buckland, which, though populated by hobbits, is very different from Hobbiton or Bag End. Buckland is surrounded by the Brandywine River and the Old Forest, both of which are somewhat perilous. Hobbits from Hobbiton fear water, as none of them can swim, and the Old Forest is strange and frightening, its trees seeming almost predatory. To protect against these dangers, the Bucklanders built a hedge and keep their doors locked at night, which is unheard of in Hobbiton. The weary travelers are given a bath and supper. Frodo decides that he must finally tell Merry and Pippin that he is, in fact, leaving the Shire for good, a fact that Frodo thought was a complete secret thus far. Frodo is highly surprised when Merry reveals that they have known for some time, not only about Frodo's plans to leave, but also about the ring and the great peril. With Sam as eavesdropper, the other hobbits have pieced together a good bit of Frodo's situation. Frodo does not want to subject his friends to such dangerous circumstances, but Merry and Pippin both insist on coming along. They are his friends and they understand the danger at least as well as he does, which is to say, not very well at all. Despite his surprise, Frodo is happy to hear that his friends wish to join him. Because of the Black Riders, Frodo decides that the next day they must set out away from the road, cutting through the old forest that borders on Buckland. Though the forest is ominous, at the moment it seems safer than an encounter with the riders. The other hobbits agree to Frodo's plan. Their friend Fatty Bolger will stay behind to keep up the pretense that Frodo is living at Crickhollow. That night, Frodo dreams he is looking out a window over a dark forest, in which he hears the sounds of animals sniffing around, looking for him. Then he is on a barren field. He hears the sound of the great sea, which he has never heard in real life, and he smells the smell of salt. He sees a tall white tower before him and he struggles toward it to climb it. Then there is a light in the sky and the sound of thunder. Chapter 6: The Old Forest. The next morning, the group sets off early through a heavy mist. Merry leads them to the main path into the forest. They plan to head northeast and follow the road at a distance. They enter the old forest but immediately lose the path. The forest is hot and stuffy, and it seems as if the trees are listening to the hobbits and even moving to block their progress. The hobbits find the path eventually, but it begins to turn in the wrong direction, toward the heart of the forest. Leaving the path, they find that every time they head north, the trees seem to block their way, only permitting them to go southeast, deeper into the forest. The hobbits reach the river with Rivendell in the middle of the old forest. Passing under an enormous old willow tree, they suddenly feel so hot and sleepy that they sit down. All except Sam fall asleep with their backs against the tree. Sam fights off drowsiness and goes to find the hobbits' ponies, which have wandered off. Sam hears two noises, a splash and a click like a lock fastening. When he returns to the others, he sees that Frodo has fallen into the river at the foot of the tree and is seemingly pinned down by one of its roots. Sam hauls Frodo out, and Frodo says he is certain that the old tree pushed him into the river. Turning around, Frodo and Sam see that Merry and Pippin are caught inside the cracks of the trunk of the tree, which has closed around them. The hobbits smack the tree and then try lighting a fire near it. However, the tree begins to squeeze Merry, who yells that the tree is telling him it will crush him if the hobbits do not put the fire out. Frodo, panicking, runs down the river yelling for help. He is surprised to hear an answer, the sound of nonsensical, jolly singing. A plump man in a blue coat and yellow boots comes dancing down the path. He calls himself Tom Bombadil and, seeing the hobbit's situation, appears to be familiar with the tricks of Old Man Willow. Going up to the tree, Tom sings into the crack and orders the tree to release Merry and Pippin. Old Man Willow promptly obeys. In answer to the hobbits' thanks, Tom tells them to join him and his bride, Goldberry, for dinner. The hobbits, somewhat bewildered, follow Tom along the river as he sings. They come out of the old forest into a pleasant clearing, and then go up to a hill where Bombadil's house stands. A woman's voice sings out to them,